Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The water in Millbrook Quarry doesn't move right anymore. I noticed it first on a Tuesday morning, standing at the edge where the old Wilson property meets the quarry fence, watching my coffee steam curl into the September air. The surface should have been glass smooth at that hour. Instead, these slow, deliberate ripples rolled outward from the center, like something breathing underneath. But here's what made me start recording everything. What made me need to tell anyone, about this. Yesterday, I found Tommy Morrison's truck parked by the North Access Road. Engine still warm, keys in the ignition, his fishing gear scattered on the rocks like he'd dropped everything and run. Only Tommy didn't run. His prosthetic leg was still attached to his fishing waders, floating in the shallows. If you're listening to this at night, maybe check your windows are locked. Not that it matters, not if you live anywhere near water. And now, the story begins. My name is Sarah Chen, and I've lived in Millbrook, Pennsylvania for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. I know that precisely because I moved here the day after my divorce was finalized. Needed somewhere quiet, somewhere to disappear. The real estate agent, Dottie Hutchins, she'd laughed when I asked about the quarry. Oh, honey, that old thing's been flooded since '72. Kids swim there in summer, though we're not supposed to encourage it. Liability and all that. The house on Sycamore Drive backed right up to the quarry's eastern edge. From my kitchen window, I could see across the whole expanse of water, almost a mile wide. They say it goes down 300 feet in some places. Used to be limestone mining. Good money in it until the flood. That first Tuesday in September started like any other. Coffee at 5:47 a.m. Letting Murphy, my golden retriever, out for his morning constitutional. The mist hanging over the water like a funeral shroud. Murphy wouldn't go near the back fence that morning. Just stood on the deck, whimpering, his whole body trembling. "What's wrong, boy?" I walked down the steps, bare feet on wet grass. That's when I saw them. The ripples. Now, I need you to understand something. Millbrook Quarry doesn't have ripples. No outlet, no inlet, no current. The water just sits. Has for 50 years. But that morning, these perfect concentric circles spread from a point maybe 200 yards out. Slow, methodical, like breathing. I counted. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, between each pulse. Murphy, pressed against my legs, nearly knocked me over, trying to herd me back inside, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away, because between those ripples, just for a second, I saw something break the surface. Smooth, dark, the size of a small car, then nothing. Coffee forgotten, I grabbed my phone, started recording, sent the video to my friend Janet, who works at Penn State, Marine Biology Department. Her text came back quick. "Sarah, that's not possible. Quarries don't have anything that big. Maybe a log? Logs don't swim in patterns. Logs don't make water move like it's afraid." The rest of that day I couldn't focus. Kept checking the window. The water stayed mirror calm, mocking me, like I'd imagined it all. Murphy refused to go outside except on the leash, pulling toward the front yard, away from the water. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke to Murphy growling. Low, primal. A sound I'd never heard him make. He stood at the bedroom window, hackles raised, staring at the quarry. I crept over, peeked through the curtains. The moon was full, turning the water silver black, and there, cutting through the surface like a knife, was a wake, V-shaped, moving steadily along the far shore, too big for a beaver, too steady for debris. It turned at the corner, following the quarry's edge. Patrolling. I grabbed my phone again, but my hands shook too much. By the time I steadied them, the wake was gone. Just moonlight on still water. The next morning, I called animal control. Got Betty Ramirez, who I'd met at the grocery store a few times. "Morning, Sarah. What can I help you with?" This is going to sound crazy, but is there anything in the quarry? Any large animals? Silence. Then, "Why do you ask?" I told her about the ripples, the wake. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed. "You're not the first to call. We've had reports, but every time we send someone out, there's nothing. Dean Morrison even took his boat out last month with sonar equipment. Found nothing but old mining equipment and car wrecks from teenagers being stupid. But you said there were other reports? Look, between you and me, yeah, going back years, pets going missing near the water, weird sounds at night, but officially, Millbrook Quarry is just an old flooded mine. Nothing more." After we hung up, I did what any rational person would do. I Googled Millbrook Quarry, Pennsylvania strange sightings. Found nothing but a few Reddit posts from deleted accounts. Stories about missing swimmers in the 80s. A diving team that went down in 95 and came up missing a member. They said equipment malfunction. Said he got tangled in something and drowned. But the other divers, they quit, all of them. Same day. That afternoon I drove to the Millbrook Library. Small place. Smells like old paper and lemon pledge. The librarian, Mrs. Kowalski, remembered me from when I'd gotten my library card. "Looking for something specific, dear? History of the quarry, newspaper articles maybe?" Her face changed. Just for a second. "Research project. Something like that." She led me to the microfilm section. Gestured to the cabinets. 1972 forward is digitized. Anything earlier, you'll need the film reader. Machine's temperamental, but it works. I started with 1972, the flood. Normal reporting at first. Heavy rains. Pumps failing. Then I found it. July 18, 1972. A small article buried on page 6. Mining foreman reports unusual discoveries before evacuation. The article was short. Frustratingly vague. Mentioned that foreman Rick Hensley claimed that they'd broken through to a natural cave system 3 days before the flood. Said they'd found anomalous biological matter and evidence of an undiscovered ecosystem. Company spokesman dismissed it as the ravings of an overworked employee. Rick Hensley died in a car accident 2 weeks later. Single vehicle. Drove straight off Miller's Bridge like he was trying to get away from something. I printed the article. Kept digging. Found 3 more deaths in the months after the flood. All miners who'd been working the deep sections. All accidents. All involved water. One drowned in his bathtub. Another in a hotel pool in Atlantic City. The third, his car, was found in the Susquehanna River, 60 miles away. My hands were shaking by the time I reached 1973. That's when the first swimmer went missing. Jenny Palmer, age 19, strong swimmer, lifeguard at the community pool. Went for an evening swim at the quarry with friends. They said she dove off the high rocks and never came up. Searched for days. Never found a body. There were others, every few years, always strong swimmers, always in the deeper parts, always at dusk or dawn. The quarry got a reputation. Kids still swam there, but only in the shallows, only in groups, never alone. I was so absorbed in the articles I didn't notice Mrs. Kowalski standing behind me until she spoke. "Finding what you need?" I jumped. Turned, she wasn't smiling. "My husband worked the quarry," she said quietly. "Before the flood, night shift foreman. Used to come home talking about sounds in the deep tunnels. Like whale song, he said, but louder, closer. Company said it was echo distortion. Gave the men hazard pay to keep quiet." She looked around, confirming we were alone. Week before the flood, he quit. 40 years with the company, just walked away. Wouldn't say why. Just packed us up, moved to Ohio. We only came back after he passed. What did he think it was? She shrugged. Never said. but he never went swimming again. Not in pools, not in lakes, wouldn't even take baths, only showers. And Sarah? She leaned closer. Whatever you think you saw, trust it. Trust it and stay away from the water. I left the library with a folder of photocopies and more questions than answers. Drove home the long way, avoiding the quarry road. Murphy met me at the door, tail wagging. Normal golden retriever enthusiasm. Maybe I was overthinking, maybe it was just big fish. Catfish can grow huge. Sturgeon, even. Climate change pushing species into new areas. That night, I made dinner. Watched some mindless TV, took Murphy out front for his evening walk. Almost convinced myself everything was fine. Then, around midnight, I heard it. Through my open bedroom window. A sound that turned my blood to ice water. Low, resonant, like a foghorn, but organic, alive. It rolled across the water, seemed to press against the windows. Murphy whimpered, crawled under the bed. I lay there, paralyzed, waiting. The sound came again, closer. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. Something enormous. Something that shouldn't exist. Calling. When silence finally returned, I got up. Closed every window, locked them, drew the curtains. But I couldn't stop thinking about those miners. About Jenny Palmer. About Tommy Morrison's prosthetic leg that I wouldn't find for 3 more days. Because the thing in Millbrook Quarry wasn't done. It was just getting started. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that sound. Felt it vibrating through the walls. Murphy stayed under the bed until dawn, only crawling out when sunlight hit the windows. Wednesday morning came gray and drizzling. The kind of weather that makes Pennsylvania feel like the edge of the world. I called in sick to my remote job. Couldn't imagine staring at spreadsheets while that thing swam less than 100 yards from my house. Around 9 a.m., someone knocked on my door. Firm, official. I found 2 people on my porch, man and woman. Cheap suits despite the rain. Sarah Chen? The woman smiled. Practiced. Professional. I'm Agent Martinez. This is Agent Cooper. We're with the State Environmental Protection Agency. We understand you've had some concerns about the quarry. They had badges. Looked real enough, but something felt off. Maybe it was how Agent Cooper kept glancing at the water, or how Martinez's smile never touched her eyes. How did you know? Mrs. Ramirez at Animal Control filed a report. Standard procedure to follow up on potential environmental hazards. Martinez's voice was smooth, rehearsed. May we come in? I led them to the living room. Cooper immediately walked to the window overlooking the quarry. Martinez sat across from me, pulled out a tablet. Tell us what you've observed. I explained about the ripples, the wake, the sound. She typed, nodding occasionally. Cooper never turned from the window. Have you observed any dead fish? Unusual algae blooms? Chemical odors? Martinez asked. No, nothing like that. Any contact with the water, swimming, boating? No, I don't go near it. Cooper finally spoke. Low, gravelly, smart. Martinez shot him a look. Cleared her throat. What Agent Cooper means is that unauthorized swimming is prohibited, for safety reasons. Is there something in the water, something dangerous? Miss Chen, Millbrook Quarry is a controlled environment. We monitor it regularly. I can assure you there's nothing dangerous in the water. She stood, handed me a business card. If you observe anything else unusual, please call this number. Don't post about it online. Don't contact local authorities. Call us directly. Why shouldn't I? Misinformation spreads quickly on social media. We prefer to investigate thoroughly before causing unnecessary panic. That practiced smile again. Thank you for your time. They left quickly. Too quickly. I watched their black SUV pull away, noticed they turned toward the quarry road instead of back to town. The business card had no address, no website, just a phone number and the state seal. I Googled Agent Elena Martinez, Pennsylvania, EPA. Nothing. Agent Cooper, Pennsylvania, EPA. Nothing. The phone number traced to a non-working line. They weren't EPA. That afternoon, the rain stopped. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds. I decided I needed answers. Real ones. Started with Tommy Morrison's house. Tommy lived alone in a cabin on the north side of the quarry. His truck was still there, like I'd seen Tuesday morning. Fishing gear scattered on the rocks. I parked behind his Ford, grabbed my phone to document everything. The scene was wrong. His tackle box open, lures spilled everywhere. Rod and reel looked like they'd been dropped mid-cast, his coffee thermos on its side, contents long cold. And there, at the water's edge, his prosthetic leg, still attached to his waders, like he'd been pulled right out of them. I called 911. Sheriff Dalton arrived within 20 minutes, mid-50s, built like an ex-linebacker. Took one look at the scene and radioed for backup. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. This is a crime scene." "Crime scene? You think someone—" "I don't think anything yet." But his hand rested on his sidearm as he scanned the water. "You touch anything?" "No, just saw his truck and found this." He questioned me for an hour, basic stuff, when I'd arrived, why I was there. If I knew Tommy. I mentioned seeing his truck Tuesday morning. Didn't mention the fake EPA agents. Something told me to keep that quiet. As we talked, more police arrived, then paramedics, then a dive team. They worked efficiently, professionally. But I noticed things. How the divers kept checking their equipment. How they stayed close to shore. How one of them crossed himself before entering the water. "Sheriff," one of the divers called, "you need to see this." Dalton walked over. They talked in low voices. I caught fragments. Drag marks. Too big. Doesn't make sense. When Dalton came back, his face was grim. "Miss Chen, I need you to go home. Lock your doors. Don't go near the water." What did they find? He hesitated. Tommy's boot. The other one, 60 feet down, wedged in some old equipment. He paused. Something dragged him down there. Fast. Hard enough to pull him clean out of his prosthetic. What could do that? That's what we're going to find out. Go home. We'll be in touch. I drove home in a daze. The quarry looked different now, darker, hungrier. Murphy met me at the door, anxious, needing out. I took him to the front yard, kept my back to the water. That evening I couldn't eat, kept thinking about Tommy, about those drag marks. 60 feet straight down. What could do that? What would want to? Around 8 p.m., my doorbell rang. Janet stood on my porch, holding a laptop and a bottle of wine. "Okay, I've been thinking about your video all week. The more I analyze it, the more it doesn't make sense. Can I see the quarry?" I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to be alone. We went to the back deck. The water was still, reflecting the dying light. Janet set up her laptop, pulled up the video I'd sent. "See these ripples? The spacing is consistent, exactly 3.7 seconds between pulses. That suggests something breathing. But here's the thing. The volume of water displaced? Based on the wave amplitude, whatever's making these ripples has to be massive, like blue whale massive. That's impossible. How would something that big even get in here? That's what I thought. So I did some research." She pulled up geological surveys. Millbrook Quarry isn't just a pit. It connects to an extensive cave system, flooded limestone caves that go, well, no one knows how deep. Some of these could connect to underground rivers, even other bodies of water. You're saying something swam here, from where? I don't know, but Sarah, there are things in the deep ocean we've never seen. Species that have existed since before the dinosaurs. If something found its way into these caves... A splash interrupted her. Close. We both jumped, turned toward the water. Ripples spread from a point maybe 30 feet from my dock. Then nothing. "Did you see what made that?" Janet whispered. "No." but I'd felt it. The water had moved wrong, like something massive had turned just below the surface, testing, watching. We went inside, locked the door. Janet stayed the night, sleeping on my couch. Neither of us mentioned why, but when that low, resonant call echoed across the water at 3 a.m., we both heard it. Both felt it shake the windows. In the morning, Janet left early, hugged me at the door. "Sarah, maybe you should visit your sister for a while, take a vacation." I can't just leave. Why not? I didn't have an answer, or maybe I did. Maybe part of me needed to know, needed to understand. The quarry had chosen to show itself to me. I couldn't leave until I knew why. That Thursday, I established a routine. Coffee at the front window, watching, waiting. The police had Tommy's truck towed. The dive team searched for 2 more days, found nothing. No body, no explanation. Just those drag marks disappearing into the deep. I started a journal, documenting everything, times, dates, patterns. The ripples always started between 5:45 and 6:15 a.m. The night calls came between 2:47 and 3:23 a.m. Always from the deep end. Always that same interval. 3.7 seconds, like breathing. Friday brought fog. Thick, white, swallowing the world beyond my fence. I couldn't see the water, but I could hear it. Little splashes, movement, something testing the shallows. Murphy wouldn't go outside at all. I had to carry him to the front yard. He did his business quickly, pulled me back inside. I'd never seen him so scared. That afternoon I got a call. Unknown number. "Miss Chen, this is Dr. Elizabeth Vance. I understand you've had some unusual experiences at Millbrook Quarry." "Who are you? How did you get this number?" "I'm a biologist specializing in cryptozoology. I've been tracking reports from your area for several years. I'd like to meet, compare notes." We arranged to meet at the Willow Street Cafe in town. Public, safe. She was younger than her voice suggested. Late 30s. Intense eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Before we begin," she said, sliding a folder across the table, "I need you to understand. What I'm about to share isn't officially recognized. My colleagues think I'm chasing shadows, but I know what I've seen, what others have seen." The folder contained reports, sightings, going back decades. Not just Millbrook, other quarries, deep lakes. Always the same pattern. Ripples, sounds, disappearances. "They're called relics," she said quietly. "Species that should be extinct, that survived in isolated pockets. Deep caves, underground rivers. When humans flood these spaces, we let them out." She nodded. "The limestone caves under Pennsylvania are ancient, Precambrian. There could be anything down there. Cut off from the surface for millions of years, evolving, adapting, waiting. What does it want? To eat, to survive, to reclaim territory that was once theirs." She leaned forward. "Miss Chen, you need to understand. These things are intelligent. They observe, learn patterns, test boundaries. The fact that it's showing itself to you means what? Means it's not afraid anymore." I drove home numb. The fog had lifted, but the quarry still looked gray, dead, like something had drained the color from the world. Dr. Vance had given me her number. Told me to call if anything changed, told me to be careful. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Tommy, about those miners, about Jenny Palmer and all the others. Were they down there? In those caves? In the dark? At 3:07 a.m., the sound came again, but different, closer, urgent. I crept to the window, peered through the curtains. The moon was new, providing almost no light, but I could see the water moving, churning, like something massive was swimming just below the surface, circling faster and faster. Then it stopped. The water went still. Silence pressed against my ears. A wet slap against my deck made me jump. Then another. Something climbing the stairs, heavy, dragging. Murphy growled, low and scared. I grabbed him. Backed away from the window, more wet sounds, closer, right outside the glass. Then I saw it, pressed against my sliding door, a hand. But wrong. Too long. Webbed, gray-green in the moonlight. It pressed harder, leaving wet prints. Testing the glass. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The hand slid up, leaving a trail of slime. Then a face. God, that face. Human-shaped but stretched. Eyes too big, too black. Mouth open, showing rows of needle teeth. Tommy's class ring gleamed on one webbed finger. It stared at me, through me, then smiled. Deliberate, knowing. Tapped on the glass with Tommy's ring, once, twice, 3 times. Then it was gone, sliding back into the water, leaving only wet prints and the smell of deep places. Dark places, hungry places. I grabbed my phone, called Dr. Vance. She answered on the first ring. It was at my house. It had Tommy's ring. Pack a bag. Get out, now. I can't just... Sarah, listen to me. It's marked you. Chosen you. You're part of its territory now. Leave. Tonight. But even as she spoke, I knew I wouldn't. Couldn't. Because the quarry wasn't done with me. And deep down, in some primitive part of my brain, I wasn't done with it either. I didn't leave. Couldn't explain why, even to myself. Dr. Vance called 6 times that night. I let it go to voicemail. Sat in my living room with every light on, Murphy pressed against my legs, watching the sliding door. The wet prints had dried to a crusty film that caught the light like oil. By dawn, exhaustion won. I dozed on the couch, woke to Murphy barking. Not his usual alert bark, desperate, terrified. He stood at the front window, whole body rigid. Mrs. Patterson from across the street was at my door. Elderly, always walking her ancient poodle at ungodly hours. But she wasn't holding a leash. Her housecoat was soaked. Her eyes vacant. "Sarah, dear, have you seen Princess? She got away, ran toward the water." "Mrs. Patterson, you're soaking wet. Come inside." "I need to find Princess. She's afraid of the water, always has been. But this morning she just ran, like something was calling her." I grabbed a towel, wrapped it around her shoulders. She was ice cold, shivering. "When did she run off?" What time is it?" I followed her to the quarry, saw her swimming. But Princess can't swim. She was going so fast. Then she went under and... "Mrs. Patterson, sit down. I'll call for help." "No." She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "No police. It doesn't like the police. Told me so. In my head. Said if I bring police, it'll take more. Take them all." "What told you?" Her eyes focused for a moment. Clear, terrified. "The thing that used to be Tommy." She collapsed then. I caught her, eased her to the floor. Called 911 despite her warning. The paramedics arrived quickly. Said it looked like hypothermia. Shock, but as they loaded her into the ambulance, one of them pulled me aside. "Where'd you find her?" She came to my door. Said her dog ran to the quarry. He glanced toward the water. "3rd one this week. Pet's going missing. Owner's acting strange after. Sheriff's thinking about closing the area. 3rd, I only heard about Tommy. Tommy Morrison wasn't the first, just the first human." He lowered his voice. "Look, off the record, something's wrong here. Been wrong since Tuesday. Animals know it, they're leaving. Every dog, cat, bird for miles. Except the ones that get called. The ones that go to the water. After they left, I did something stupid. Brave, both. I got in my car and drove the quarry road, full circle. 4 miles of crumbling asphalt. Counting, recording. 17 abandoned cars. Not old. Recent, days old. Keys still in ignitions. Doors open. Personal items scattered. Like the drivers had suddenly decided to walk. Toward the water. At the old boat launch, I found Sheriff Dalton's cruiser. Empty, radio crackling. His hat floating in the shallows. No sign of him. But in the mud, drag marks, same as Tommy's. Leading straight into the deep, I called Dr. Vance. This time she didn't answer. Left a message, kept driving. Had to complete the circle, had to understand the pattern. The quarry was changing. The water, normally blue-green, had turned black. Oil slick. Things moved just below the surface, not one large thing. Many. Writhing, waiting. At the north entrance, I found the fake EPA agent's SUV, doors open, engine running. Agent Martinez's tablet on the ground, screen cracked. Playing a video file on loop, I picked it up. The video showed underwater footage. Murky, handheld, someone diving deep. Deeper than anyone should go in a quarry. The timestamp read 3 days ago, 2:47 a.m. Shapes in the darkness, architecture, not natural. Carved stone, symbols that hurt to look at. Then movement, the camera spinning, bubbles, a face in the murk. Human, but elongated. Eyes reflecting the light like a cat's. Then static, the video restarted. I watched it 3 more times. Each loop revealed more details. The carved stones were arranged, purposeful, like an entrance or a temple. And in the final frames just before the static, other faces. Dozens. All watching the camera. All smiling. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Sarah, it's Martinez. Agent Martinez, are you at home? I found your car, your tablet. What were you really looking for?" Silence. Then, "Get away from the water. It knows we found the temple. It's angry. It's calling them back." Calling who back? Everyone it's touched. Everyone who's been in the water, ever. They're all coming home. The line went dead. I looked up from the tablet. The quarry road was no longer empty. People walked along the shoulder. Dozens. Quiet, purposeful. All heading the same direction. Toward the water. I recognized some. Janet Mills from the post office. David Park from the hardware store. Kids from the high school, adults, elderly, all with that same vacant expression. All soaking wet despite the dry morning. One turned as I passed, smiled, waved. Water poured from his mouth as he mouthed words. "Join us." I floored it, sped home. Murphy met me at the door, frantic. I grabbed his leash, my laptop, the journal, threw everything in the car. We were leaving. Now. Finally. But the road out of Millbrook was blocked. Not by police, by people. Standing shoulder to shoulder. Hundreds. All wet, all smiling. All pointing back toward the quarry. I turned around. Tried the south road, same thing, east, west. Every exit blocked by silent, dripping people. The town was sealed. I drove back home. What else could I do? The streets were emptying, everyone walking, all in the same direction. Even Mrs. Chen from next door, still in her nightgown. Her kids trailing behind, holding hands, humming something tuneless and wrong. Inside, I barricaded the doors. Filled the tub and sinks with fresh water. Some instinct, some preparation. Murphy whined constantly now, pacing, scratching at the front door. The phone rang. Dr. Vance. "Sarah, I'm 30 miles out. Roads are blocked. Military's setting up a perimeter. They're not letting anyone in or out. It's taking everyone. The whole town." "I know. I'm sorry. I should have warned you sooner. This has happened before, other places, when they find the old temples, when they wake up." "Wake what up?" "The ones who built the temples. The ones who ruled before humans, before mammals. They're not extinct, just sleeping. Waiting. And now," I looked again. The patterns hurt, but yes. Meanings emerged, not words, older than words, pure concept, history written in geometry. "They're not from here," I said slowly. "Not from Earth. They came from outside, between spaces, found water, made it theirs. Yes, millions of years ago, before life as we know it. They shaped evolution, guided it, created us." Her smile was sad. "We were always meant to return, to serve when the stars aligned, when the conditions were right. Why fight it then? Because some part of me is still human, still believes we have a choice." She pulled something from her pocket, a flash drive. Martinez uploaded everything before she changed. Government files. History they've hidden. Other sites. Other towns. This isn't the first emergence, won't be the last. I took the drive. Why give this to me? Because you're the anomaly. It touched you, marked you, but didn't take you. Your resistance is unexpected. Unprecedented. She tilted her head, listening to something I couldn't hear. They're curious, want to study you, understand why you're different. I'm not different, I'm terrified. Exactly. The others felt peace, joy, acceptance. You felt terror, fought back. That's why you're here instead of in the water. They need to understand fear. It's the one emotion they can't replicate, can't comprehend. Murphy growled. The walls pulsed brighter. Something was coming. Go, Vance pointed to a tunnel. Up, always up. Find the old mining shaft, get to the surface, warn others. Come with me. She held up her webbed hands. I'm too far gone. Another day, maybe two, and I'll be like the others. But you might have a chance. The singing started again. Closer, echoing through stone. Vance's eyes went glassy for a moment. When they cleared, she was crying. Run, Sarah, now, before I forget why I helped you. I ran, Murphy at my heels. The tunnel sloped upward, rough-hewn. Human-made, mining equipment rusted in alcoves. How deep were we? How far from sun and sky? Behind us, the singing grew louder. Multiple voices pursuing, patient. They had all the time in the world. I had minutes, maybe less. The tunnel branched, left or right. Murphy chose left without hesitation. I followed, trusted his instincts over mine. The path narrowed, ceiling dropping, had to crouch, crawl. Stone scraped my palms, tore my clothes. Then air, different air, fresher, a ventilation shaft. I climbed. Murphy somehow managing despite having no hands. Up, muscles burning, lungs screaming. Broke through into another chamber. Wooden supports. Definitely man-made. Mining office maybe. Desks rotted to dust. But a ladder. Metal. Leading up to a shaft capped with wood. I climbed, pushed, the wood splintered, daylight. Painful, beautiful. I hauled Murphy up, then myself. We emerged in the forest. Half a mile from the quarry, from town. The scene below was a nightmare. Millbrook was empty, streets deserted, cars abandoned, doors hanging open. But the quarry teemed with life. Wrong life. Things that had been human swam in patterns. Diving, surfacing. Building something in the shallows. Structures of bone and flesh. Architecture of the transformed. At the center, something vast broke the surface, not fully. Never fully. Just suggestions of size, of power. Tentacles thick as subway cars. An eye that reflected the sky like a broken mirror. It watched me, knew me, let me see. The flash drive burned in my pocket. Evidence, proof. But who would believe? Who could help? The military perimeter Vance mentioned was nowhere to be seen. No helicopters. No response. Just silence and the distant singing. Murphy pressed against me. Normal dog again, traumatized but whole. We backed away from the view, into the trees. Had to move, had to get far away, but the roads were still blocked. Not by people now, by growth, organic, pulsing. The quarry was spreading, claiming territory, changing the land like it had changed the people. I remembered something from the symbols. The old ones didn't just live in water, they were water. Every drop connected. Every molecule a neuron in a vast alien mind. And that mind was waking up, spreading, reclaiming a world that had always been theirs. My phone had no signal, but the recording app still worked. I documented everything, the empty town, the transformed quarry, the things that swam where people should be. Evidence for whoever found it, if anyone was left to find it. Night fell fast. We sheltered in an abandoned ranger station. High ground, solid walls, multiple exits. I barricaded the doors, found emergency supplies, water bottles that I didn't dare drink, canned food, a radio that picked up only static. Murphy wouldn't eat, just stared at the door, waiting, listening. I talked to him. Needed to hear a voice, even my own. We'll wait until dawn, find another way out. There has to be a gap. A road they missed. We'll get help. Tell someone. Stop this. A sound cut her off. Not the low call from before. Singing. Hundreds of voices from the quarry. Human voices twisted into harmonies that predated speech. That predated thought. Sarah? Sarah, are you there? I'm here. Whatever happens, don't go to the water. Don't listen to the singing. Don't... The power cut out. Phone dead. Silence except for the singing. Growing louder, closer. I looked out the window. The quarry was glowing. Phosphorescent. Beautiful, terrible. Things rose from the deep, huge, impossible. But also the people. The taken, swimming in patterns, diving. Returning changed. Murphy had stopped whining. Sat perfectly still, head tilted, listening. His tail wagged once, twice. He walked to the sliding door, pawed at it. No, Murphy, stay. He looked at me, through me. His eyes reflected the glow from the water. Then he spoke, actually spoke, voice rusty, wrong, but unmistakable. Come home, Sarah, everyone's waiting. I ran, up the stairs into the bathroom, locked the door, could hear Murphy following. Claws on hardwood, patient, inevitable. The singing was inside my head now, showing me things. The temple beneath the water, the city beyond, streets of bone, palaces of living flesh, and at the center something vast, ancient, hungry, loving. It had been alone so long, sleeping in the deep, dreaming of the time before, when its kind ruled, when humans were prey. Now it was awake, calling its children home. I understood then, the town hadn't been randomly chosen. We'd been marked, generation after generation, drawn to live near the water, to swim in it, drink it, let it seep into our bones, change us, prepare us. Every person who'd ever touched the quarry water carried its mark, its claim, and when it woke, when the miners broke through to its temple, the countdown began. Tommy was just the first. The test. Now it was time for the harvest. Murphy scratched at the door. Patient. Sarah, don't make this harder. You've seen its face. Felt its call. You belong to the water now. We all do. I climbed into the empty bathtub, pulled the shower curtain, childish, useless, but I needed barriers, needed the illusion of safety. My phone, miraculously, had one bar. I started recording, audio message. Had to leave something, evidence, warning. If you're hearing this, stay away from Millbrook. Stay away from the quarry. It's not water anymore. It's them. They're coming back. All of them. The old ones. The deep ones. They never left. Just waited. And we invited them in. Every time we swam, every time we drank, we let them inside. The bathroom door splintered. Not Murphy. Something larger. Wet footsteps. Breathing that sounded like drowning. Sarah, not Murphy's voice anymore, Tommy's, but wrong. Liquid. Time to come home, time to change, time to serve. I kept recording. Don't trust the water, any water, they're connected, all of it. Rivers, lakes, oceans, rain. It's all one thing, one mind, waiting, watching, choosing. The shower curtain ripped away. I looked up, wished I hadn't. It wasn't Tommy, not anymore. The shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, skin like a frog's, eyes black pools, but it wore his face like a mask, smiled with his mouth. You were the first to see, the first to understand. That makes you special, important. You'll help the others change, help them accept, help them serve. It reached for me, webbed fingers dripping, patient, inevitable. I hit send on the recording. prayed it would upload, warn someone, anyone. Then the hands closed around me, wet, cold, pulling me up, toward the door, toward the stairs, toward the water. The last thing I remember clearly was the singing. Beautiful, terrible, pulling me under. I woke up dry. That's the first thing that didn't make sense. I should have been in the water, should have been changed. But I lay on cold stone underground. The air tasted of minerals and age. Murphy sat beside me. Normal. Golden fur gleaming in the phosphorescent light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. He whined, licked my face. Real concern, not the thing that had spoken through him. "Good boy," I whispered. My throat burned. How long had I been here? The chamber was circular, carved from living rock. Symbols covered every surface, the same ones from Martinez's video. They shifted when I looked directly at them, writhed, suggested meanings that made my head spin. A voice came from the shadows. "You're stronger than we thought." Dr. Vance stepped into the light, but wrong, half transformed, scales along her jawline, webbing between her fingers, eyes still human, still her. "Elizabeth, what?" The change isn't complete for everyone. Some of us resist, hold on to pieces of ourselves. The old ones find us useful, translators, bridges between what was and what will be. Where are we? The temple, below the quarry. This is where it began, where they waited. She gestured to the walls. "Can you read them? The symbols?" A sound cut her off. Not the low call from before, singing. Hundreds of voices from the quarry, human voices twisted into harmonies that predated speech. That predated thought. Sarah, are you there?" "I'm here." "Whatever happens, don't go to the water, don't listen to the singing, don't..." The power cut out. Phone dead. Silence except for the singing. Growing louder, closer, I looked out the window. The quarry was glowing, phosphorescent, beautiful, terrible. Things rose from the deep, huge, impossible. But also the people, the taken, swimming in patterns, diving, returning changed. Murphy had stopped whining, sat perfectly still, head tilted, listening. His tail wagged once, twice. He walked to the sliding door, pawed at it. "No, Murphy, stay." He looked at me. Through me. His eyes reflected the glow from the water. Then he spoke, actually spoke, voice rusty, wrong, but unmistakable. "Come home, Sarah. Everyone's waiting." I ran, up the stairs, into the bathroom, locked the door. Could hear Murphy following. Claws on hardwood, patient, inevitable. The singing was inside my head now, showing me things. The temple beneath the water. The city beyond. Streets of bone. Palaces of living flesh. And at the center, something vast, ancient, hungry, loving. It had been alone so long, sleeping in the deep, dreaming of the time before, when its kind ruled, when humans were prey. Now it was awake, calling its children home. I understood then. The town hadn't been randomly chosen. We'd been marked, generation after generation, drawn to live near the water, to swim in it, drink it, let it seep into our bones, change us, prepare us. Every person who'd ever touched the quarry water carried its mark, its claim, and when it woke, when the miners broke through to its temple, the countdown began. Tommy was just the first. The test. Now it was time for the harvest. Murphy scratched at the door. Patient. "Sarah, don't make this harder. You've seen its face, felt its call. You belong to the water now. We all do." I climbed into the empty bathtub, pulled the shower curtain, childish, useless. But I needed barriers, needed the illusion of safety. My phone miraculously had one bar. I started recording, audio message. Had to leave something, evidence, warning. If you're hearing this, stay away from Millbrook. Stay away from the quarry. It's not water anymore, it's them. They're coming back. All of them. The old ones, the deep ones. They never left, just waited. And we invited them in every time we swam. Every time we drank, we let them inside. The bathroom door splintered, not Murphy, something larger. Wet footsteps, breathing that sounded like drowning. Sarah, not Murphy's voice anymore, Tommy's, but wrong. Liquid. Time to come home, time to change, time to serve. I kept recording. Don't trust the water, any water, they're connected, all of it. Rivers, lakes, oceans, rain. It's all one thing, one mind waiting, watching, choosing. The shower curtain ripped away. I looked up, wished I hadn't. It wasn't Tommy, not anymore, the shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, skin like a frog's, eyes black pools. But it wore his face like a mask, smiled with his mouth. You were the first to see, the first to understand. That makes you special, important. You'll help the others change, help them accept, help them serve. It reached for me, webbed fingers dripping. Patient, inevitable. I hit send on the recording, prayed it would upload, warn someone, anyone. Then the hands closed around me, wet, cold, pulling me up, toward the door, toward the stairs, toward the water. The last thing I remember clearly was the singing. Beautiful. Terrible. Pulling me under, I woke up dry. That's the first thing that didn't make sense. I should have been in the water, should have been changed. But I lay on cold stone, underground. The air tasted of minerals and age. Murphy sat beside me. Normal. Golden fur gleaming in the phosphorescent light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. He whined, licked my face. Real concern. Not the thing that had spoken through him. Good boy, I whispered. My throat burned. How long had I been here? The chamber was circular, carved from living rock. Symbols covered every surface, the same ones from Martinez's video. They shifted when I looked directly at them. Writhed, suggested meanings that made my head spin. A voice came from the shadows. You're stronger than we thought. Dr. Vance stepped into the light, but wrong, half transformed. Scales along her jawline, webbing between her fingers, eyes still human, still her. Elizabeth? What? The change isn't complete for everyone. Some of us resist. Hold on to pieces of ourselves. The old ones find us useful, translators, bridges between what was and what will be. Where are we? The temple, below the quarry, this is where it began, where they waited. She gestured to the walls. Can you read them? The symbols? He looked at me with those golden eyes. So much trust, so much faith. I didn't deserve it, didn't know if I could save us, but I had to try. The singing started again at midnight. Louder, complex harmonies that made my teeth ache, but also beautiful. Hypnotic, I found myself humming along before I caught myself. Bit my tongue until it bled. Pain to break the spell. Through the window I saw lights, phosphorescent, moving through the trees, search parties, but not human. Not anymore, they flowed like water, reshaped themselves to pass between trees, hunting, seeking. One paused below our window, lifted what might have been a head, no face, just suggestions of features. It spoke, not with sound, directly into my mind. Sarah Chen, the resistant, the afraid. Come home. Learn. Teach us your terror. Help us understand. I didn't answer. Couldn't. But it knew where we were. They all did. Just waiting. Letting fear build. Studying my response. You cannot escape water. Cannot escape us. We are rain. Rivers. The blood in your veins. You drink us. Breathe us. We have always been inside you. Waiting. It moved on. Joined the others. But the message was clear. They could take me whenever they wanted. This freedom was an illusion. A test, an experiment in fear. I spent the night writing, documenting, uploading to every cloud service I could access offline. Fragments of data scattered like seeds, hoping some would take root. Warn others, help them understand. The flash drive revealed horrors. Dozens of towns over decades, all near water, all vanished or explained away. Mass disappearances blamed on disasters, cults, gas leaks, never the truth. Never admitting that something older than humanity was reclaiming its territory. But also hope. Notes about resistance. Rare individuals who couldn't be fully transformed. Who retained enough humanity to fight, to warn. Most were eliminated, but some escaped, formed networks, watched, waited, prepared. There was a protocol, places to go, people to find. If I could get out, if I could reach them. Dawn came gray and sickly. The quarry had grown overnight, spilled its banks. Water where no water should be. Black, viscous, alive. It crept through the streets, seeped into basements, rose through pipes. Millbrook was drowning from within. We had to move. The ranger station wouldn't stay safe much longer. I packed what I could carry. Water I didn't trust. Food, the flash drive, my pathetic journal. Outside, the world had changed. Trees dripped black sap. Grass grew in spiral patterns. The air tasted of salt and decay. Even the sun seemed dimmer, strained, like viewing it through dark water. We headed north, away from the quarry, away from town, into the hills, higher ground, drier ground. Each step a small victory, each breath a defiance. But I could feel them watching, following. Patient as the tide, they had waited millions of years. They could wait a few hours more. Wait for me to tire, to thirst, to drink. The road curved, crested a hill. Below, spread out like a map, I saw the truth. It wasn't just Millbrook. Wasn't just our quarry. Every body of water for miles glowed with that phosphorescent light. Every lake, every stream, every pond, a network, a web, connecting, spreading, waking. And in the distance, where the horizon met the sky, darkness gathered. Storm clouds. But wrong. Too thick, too purposeful. Rain was coming. Their rain. And when it fell, I understood then. Truly understood this wasn't an invasion. It was a reclamation. We had never owned this world, only borrowed it, lived in the spaces between their sleeping, and now the lease was up. The dream was ending. The old ones were coming home. But I would run, as far as I could, as long as I could, document everything, warn everyone, not because I thought we could win, but because the alternative was surrender, and that terrified them. Fear, our last weapon, our only gift, the one thing they couldn't understand or replicate. So I would be afraid, gloriously, defiantly afraid, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to save whoever was left to save. Murphy barked, alert, urgent. I turned. The storm was moving fast, too fast, and beneath its shadow the world transformed. Water rose from nowhere, shaped itself into reaching hands, hunting forms. All singing, all calling, we ran, into the hills, into the dying light, into whatever time we had left. Behind us, Millbrook disappeared beneath black water. Ahead, only questions, only fear, only the slim hope that somewhere someone would hear my warning and believe. The quarry had kept its secret for 50 years. Patient, waiting, growing stronger. Now it was free, and it was hungry. And we were the feast it had been promised so long ago. But not today, not if I could help it. Today we run. Today we survive. Today we remember what it means to be human in a world that was never really ours. The water rises. The singing grows louder. But still we run. And if you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, check your water, check your lakes, check your quarries. Look for the ripples that shouldn't be there. Listen for the calling in the deep. And whatever you do, whatever you think you see, don't go near the water. Don't let it inside. Don't let them wake up, because once they do, once they remember what this world was before we crawled from their domain, there's no going back. There's only the deep, only the dark, only the patient, loving embrace of things that have waited so long to welcome us home. I'm Sarah Chen. I lived in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, and I'm still running. The sound of water dripping, getting closer, then silence. Story number 2. That billboard on Route 47 knows things about you that you've never told anyone. Things you've buried so deep you convinced yourself they never happened. But here's what really terrifies me. It's not just watching, it's waiting for something. And after what happened to my neighbor Sarah last week, I think I know what that something is. But before I tell you what I discovered, you need to understand how this all started. Because once you hear this story, you'll never drive past another billboard the same way again. The story begins now. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw my own name glowing in neon letters 40 feet above the interstate. Marcus Chen, you left the stove on, blazed across the digital billboard in stark white text against a blood-red background. My hands tightened on the steering wheel of my Honda Civic as I passed beneath it at 70 miles per hour, the familiar hum of Route 47 suddenly feeling different. My rational mind kicked in immediately. Coincidence had to be. Marcus isn't exactly an uncommon name, and leaving appliances on is probably the most universal anxiety known to modern humanity. The billboard company was just playing psychological games, targeting the broadest possible demographic with generic fears. But as I fumbled for my phone at the next red light, my hands were shaking. 3 missed calls from my apartment complex's front desk. The fire department had been called. A neighbor smelled gas. My unit, 4B, had been evacuated as a precaution. The maintenance crew found my stove's pilot light had gone out, but the gas was still flowing. I sat there in my idling car, emergency lights flashing around me, watching the billboard grow smaller in my rearview mirror. The red glow seemed to pulse against the October sky like a heartbeat. Or maybe that was just my own pulse, hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Coincidence, I told myself again. But the word felt hollow now, like saying hello into an empty house and hearing something whisper back. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've driven past that billboard 47 times. I know because I've been counting. Each time, the message changes. Each time, it's meant for me. Marcus, your mother called again. Marcus, check your bank account. Marcus, the coffee shop girl knows you're watching. The worst part isn't that the messages are true. It's that they're true in ways I've never admitted to anyone, including myself. Yes, my mother called. She calls every Tuesday at 7 p.m., and every Tuesday I let it go to voicemail because hearing her voice reminds me of all the ways I've disappointed her. Yes, I should check my bank account, but I haven't looked at my balance in 6 weeks because I'm terrified of confirming what I already know about my student loan debt. And, yes, I do watch Emma at the coffee shop. Not in a creepy way, at least I don't think it's creepy, but the way she looks up sometimes when I'm staring, the way her smile falters just slightly. Maybe she does know. The billboard knows all of this. But how? I tried researching the company. Apex Digital Marketing, according to the small print at the bottom of the sign. Their website looks legitimate enough. Corporate stock photos, testimonials from satisfied clients, case studies about targeted advertising effectiveness. I called their customer service line. I'm calling about the billboard on Route 47. I told the cheerful voice that answered. Oh, you mean our dynamic content display. Isn't it fascinating? We use advanced algorithms to analyze traffic patterns and deliver personalized messaging based on demographic data and behavioral predictions. But how do you know? I paused, realizing how crazy I would sound. How personalized does it get? Very. We track everything. Credit card usage patterns near our displays, social media check-ins, even purchasing history from local businesses. It's all anonymized, of course, but the targeting precision is incredible. You'd be amazed what we can infer about someone just from their daily routines. The line went quiet for a moment. Then she added, in a voice that seemed suddenly less cheerful. "You're calling about a specific message, aren't you?" I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the phrase behavioral predictions. What behavior was the billboard predicting from me? And why did that question make my skin crawl? I decided to change my route to work. Take the surface streets instead of the highway. Avoid Route 47 entirely. But as I drove down Maple Street the next morning, trying to navigate the unfamiliar traffic patterns, I saw it. A smaller billboard, positioned perfectly where it would catch my attention as I waited at the intersection. "Marcus, running away won't help." My coffee cup slipped from my hand, splashing hot liquid across my lap. The car behind me honked as the light turned green, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at those 6 words, until the light cycled red again. This wasn't targeting anymore. This was something else entirely. I started keeping a journal. Not because I'm the journaling type, I can barely remember to floss regularly, but because I needed evidence. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. October 15th. "Marcus, your father wouldn't be proud." October 16th. "Marcus, Sarah from 2C is watching you." October 17th. "Marcus, you know what you did in college." That last one hit differently. My hands were trembling so badly I had to pull over into a Wendy's parking lot. I sat there for 20 minutes, engine running, trying to convince myself that thousands of people have secrets from college. The billboard was just fishing, casting a wide net of guilt and seeing what stuck. But then I thought about Sarah from 2C, and the fishing theory fell apart. Sarah Martinez lived 2 doors down from me in my apartment complex. I'd seen her maybe 5 times in the 8 months since I moved in, usually struggling with grocery bags or walking her ancient beagle, Winston. We'd exchange polite nods, the kind of distant friendliness that defines most urban neighborly relationships. So why would the billboard mention her? I found myself paying attention to Sarah after that. Not stalking, I want to be clear about that, but I noticed things. Like how she always checked her mailbox at exactly 6:15 p.m., how she kept her curtains drawn during the day but opened them at night, how she sometimes stood on her balcony at strange hours, looking out at something I couldn't see. 3 days after the billboard mentioned her, Sarah knocked on my door. "Hi," she said, fidgeting with the chain around her neck. This might sound weird, but do you drive Route 47 to work? My mouth went dry. Why? There's this billboard. It mentioned you. She laughed, but it sounded forced. God, that sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but it said something about Marcus from 4B, and you're the only Marcus I know, so... What did it say? The words came out as barely a whisper. Sarah glanced around the hallway as if checking for eavesdroppers. It said, "Sarah, ask Marcus about the accident." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What accident? That's what I was hoping you could tell me. Her eyes searched my face desperately, because I keep having these dreams about driving, about headlights and broken glass and someone screaming. But I don't remember any accident. I don't even own a car. I wanted to tell her I didn't know what she was talking about. I wanted to close the door and pretend this conversation never happened. But looking at her face, seeing the same confused terror I'd been carrying for weeks, I couldn't. I've been seeing messages too, I admitted. Personal ones. Things nobody should know. Relief flooded her features. So, I'm not going crazy. I don't think either of us is crazy. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But I think we need to figure out what that billboard really is. We agreed to meet the next evening. Sarah would drive, she'd borrow her sister's car, and we'd go to Route 47 together. See what messages appeared when we were both there. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Sarah's dream, about accidents and headlights and screaming. And despite my conscious mind insisting I'd never been in any accident, something deep in my chest kept tightening, like a knot being pulled tighter and tighter. The next evening came too quickly and not quickly enough. Sarah picked me up at 7 p.m. in a beat-up Honda Accord that smelled like vanilla air freshener and anxiety. Neither of us spoke much during the drive. What was there to say? As we approached the billboard, I could see it glowing in the distance like a digital beacon. My heart rate picked up. Sarah's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The message appeared as we got closer. Sarah and Marcus, remember June 23rd? Sarah slammed on the brakes. The car behind us honked angrily as we skidded to a stop on the shoulder of the highway, but neither of us cared about traffic. We were both staring at that date, June 23rd, feeling something cold and terrible awakening in our memories. I remember that date, Sarah whispered, but I don't know why. I did, though. Suddenly, horribly, I remembered everything. June 23rd, 3 years ago. The night everything changed, and the night I convinced myself never happened. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice barely audible over the sound of passing traffic. Sarah was still staring at the billboard, her face pale in the red glow. "Not yet." Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. "I need to remember we both do. She was right, though every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to go home, pack my things, and drive as far from Route 47 as possible. But running hadn't worked before. The billboard had found me on Maple Street. It would find me anywhere. As if responding to my thoughts, the message changed. "You can't hide from what you did." Sarah made a small sound in her throat, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. "My therapist always said trauma memories come back when we're ready to handle them. I guess the billboard doesn't care if we're ready or not. You've been seeing a therapist. For 3 years, ever since I started having panic attacks in cars, started waking up screaming about accidents I couldn't remember." She turned to look at me, her eyes reflecting the billboard's glow. "You have panic attacks too, don't you? I've heard you through the walls." I had been having them. Usually around 2 a.m., waking up with my heart racing and the taste of copper in my mouth. But I'd always assumed they were stress-related. Work pressure, money problems, the general anxiety of being 27 and feeling like I was falling behind everyone else my age. "The date," I said slowly. "June 23rd. That's when—" "When what?" Sarah prompted gently. The memory surfaced like something dead floating to the top of dark water. I didn't want to look at it, but I couldn't look away. "There was a party," I began. "Downtown, some guy from work was celebrating a promotion. I didn't really want to go, but—" I trailed off, the details becoming clearer and more terrible with each word. I'd been drinking, not a lot, but enough that I shouldn't have driven, and it was raining. Sarah nodded slowly. "I was walking home from my night shift at the hospital. I remember now. I was wearing my scrubs, and they were soaked through. I was cutting through the parking garage on 5th Street because it was faster than going around the block. The parking garage on 5th Street, where the lighting was poor, and the security cameras had been broken for months, where someone walking wouldn't be visible until it was too late. I saw you at the last second," I whispered. "I hit the brakes, but the pavement was slick, and you clipped me with your side mirror." Sarah's voice was eerily calm. "I went down hard, hit my head on the concrete, but I got back up. I was dizzy, disoriented, but I told you I was okay. You were bleeding. The memory was fully formed now, clear and horrible. From a cut on your forehead, but you kept saying you were fine, that you just wanted to get home and get dry. And you believed me because you were scared, because you'd been drinking and you didn't want to deal with police reports and insurance claims and all the complications. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I'd offered to take her to the hospital, that I'd begged her to let me call someone. But the truth was simpler and uglier than that. I had been scared. I'd seen an easy way out of a situation that could have ruined my life, and I'd taken it. I gave you my number, I said. Told you to call if you needed anything, if you changed your mind about seeing a doctor. But I never called, because I went home and passed out, and when I woke up, I couldn't remember anything about the accident. Just fragments, dreams about headlights and the smell of rain on asphalt. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the weight of what we'd just remembered. Then Sarah asked the question I was dreading. Do you think that's why I've been having problems? Memory issues, panic attacks, trouble concentrating at work. What if I had a concussion and never got treated? I couldn't answer that. The possibility that my cowardice had caused lasting damage to another person was too enormous to hold in my mind. The billboard flickered, drawing our attention back to it. The new message made my blood freeze. Sarah's symptoms are getting worse. How could it know that? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I was about to say I didn't know when another realization hit me. The coffee shop. You said you work at the hospital, but I've seen you at Miller's Coffee on Broad Street during the day. Sarah's silence was answer enough. You lost your job, I continued. The memory problems, the concentration issues. They got too bad for nursing, didn't they? 6 months ago. Tears were running down her cheeks now. I couldn't remember patient medications, made mistakes that could have been dangerous. They said I needed to take time off, get medical clearance before I could come back. And you've been living off savings, working part-time at the coffee shop, which is why I recognized you. You come in 3 times a week, always order the same thing, always sit at the corner table where you can watch me work. She turned to face me fully. I thought you might be interested in me, that's why I smiled sometimes. But you were really checking on me, weren't you, making sure I was okay? I had been, though I'd never admitted it to myself. 3 times a week for 6 months, I'd driven out of my way to buy overpriced coffee from a shop I didn't even like, just to see that Sarah was still functioning, still surviving. The billboard knows all of this, Sarah said. About the accident, about my job, about you checking on me. How is that possible? Before I could answer, the billboard changed again. It's time to make things right. And that's when I heard the footsteps behind our car. Someone was walking toward us on the highway shoulder. In the red glow of the billboard, I could make out a figure in a dark jacket, moving with purpose. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sarah, I whispered, we need to go, now. But she was staring at the approaching figure with recognition dawning on her face. Oh my God, Marcus, that's Dr. Reeves. Who? My neurologist, the one I've been seeing about the memory problems. She opened her car door before I could stop her. Dr. Reeves, what are you doing here? The man stepped into the light, and I could see he was older, maybe 60. With graying hair and tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked exactly like what you'd expect a neurologist to look like, except for one detail that made my skin crawl. He was carrying a tablet, and the screen was displaying the same red background as the billboard. Hello, Sarah. Marcus. He nodded to both of us as if this were a perfectly normal encounter. I was hoping we could finally have this conversation. What conversation? I demanded, though part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. Dr. Reeves gestured to the billboard looming above us. About Apex digital marketing. About targeted psychological profiling. About how we identify individuals who might benefit from therapeutic intervention. Sarah stepped closer to me, instinctively seeking protection. You're not making sense. Aren't I? Dr. Reeves touched something on his tablet, and the billboard message changed to, Sarah, your scan results are ready. You never told me the results were ready, Sarah said, her voice small and frightened. Because they're not the kind of results you deliver in an office setting. Dr. Reeves's tone remained infuriatingly calm. Sarah, you have a slow-building subdural hematoma. Bleeding between your brain and skull that's been ongoing for 3 years. It's what's causing your memory problems, your concentration issues, your panic attacks. There, the words hit like physical blows. I felt Sarah sway beside me. If left untreated, Dr. Reeves continued, it will kill you. Probably within the next few months. But here's the interesting part. It's completely treatable. A simple surgical procedure and you'll be back to normal within weeks. Then why? Sarah's voice cracked. Why didn't you just tell me? Because the cause of your injury complicates things. Hit-and-run accidents create liability issues, insurance complications, legal questions. His eyes shifted to me, especially when the driver is identifiable. My legs felt weak. You've known all along. Traffic cameras caught Marcus's license plate leaving the garage that night, but with no police report filed and no victim coming forward, there was no case to pursue. The footage was archived and forgotten. Dr. Reeves smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Until Sarah showed up in my office with symptoms consistent with untreated head trauma. So you've been, what, stalking us? I could barely get the words out. Monitoring. Sarah needed to remember the accident before she could make informed decisions about treatment and legal recourse. And you, Marcus, needed to understand the consequences of your actions. He gestured to the billboard again. Apex Digital Marketing is a subsidiary of my research foundation. We specialize in targeted psychological intervention for individuals dealing with suppressed trauma. The billboard flickered. Marcus, time to face the consequences. This is insane, I said. You can't just manipulate people like this. Can't I? You've both been living with the truth buried in your subconscious for 3 years. Sarah's been dying slowly, while you've been consumed with guilt you couldn't even name. My methods may be unorthodox, but they're effective. Sarah spoke up, her voice stronger than I expected. What do you want from us? Honesty, accountability, resolution. Dr. Reeves pulled up something else on his tablet. Sarah, you need surgery within the next 2 weeks. The procedure costs roughly $40,000. Your former employer's insurance won't cover it because you're no longer employed, and your personal insurance has a clause excluding treatment for injuries sustained in unreported accidents. But Marcus's insurance would cover it, I realized. If this were reported as the accident, it should have been 3 years ago. Precisely, along with compensation for lost wages, ongoing medical expenses, and pain and suffering. Dr. Reeves looked between us. All you have to do is walk into a police station together and tell the truth about what happened on June 23rd. The weight of 3 years of suppressed guilt crashed down on me all at once. DUI charges, even retroactively. Insurance rates through the roof. Possible jail time. My career, my reputation, my carefully constructed life. All of it would crumble. But looking at Sarah, seeing the hope and fear warring in her expression, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. None of that mattered as much as her life. Okay, I said quietly. I'll do it. Sarah stared at me. Marcus, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I looked up at the billboard, which now displayed a simple message. Truth. I should have done it 3 years ago. Dr. Reeves nodded approvingly. The police station on Oak Street is open 24 hours. I'll meet you there with Sarah's medical files and the archived traffic footage. We can have this resolved by morning. As he walked away, disappearing back into the darkness beyond the billboard's glow, Sarah and I stood in silence for a long moment. Are you sure about this? She asked finally. I thought about the last 3 years. The sleepless nights, the unnamed anxiety, the way I'd been unconsciously checking on her at the coffee shop. The billboard had been right about one thing. Running away hadn't helped. It had just delayed the inevitable reckoning. I'm sure, I said. Let's go tell the truth. As we drove toward the police station, I glanced back at the billboard one last time. The message had changed to simply, "Well done." But something about those words made me uneasy. They felt less like congratulations and more like the end of one experiment and the beginning of another. I thought about Dr. Reeves and his research foundation, about Apex Digital Marketing and their targeted psychological intervention. How many other billboards were out there? How many other people were being watched, manipulated, guided toward confessions and reckonings they weren't ready for? And as we pulled into the police station parking lot, I realized the most disturbing truth of all. I was grateful for it. Despite everything, despite the manipulation and the fear and the loss of control, I was grateful that something had finally forced me to face what I'd done. Which meant that Dr. Reeves's methods, however twisted, actually worked. That thought terrified me more than any billboard message ever could. 3 months later, I still drive Route 47 to work every day. Sarah had her surgery. It was successful, and she's already back to nursing part-time. We see each other sometimes, usually just a nod in the hallway, but there's something different in her eyes now. Relief, maybe, or closure. But here's what keeps me awake at night. The billboard is still there, still changing its messages, still watching. Last week I saw it display a message meant for the woman in the car next to me. "Janet, your husband found the emails. She nearly rear-ended a truck." So I have to ask, if you're listening to this story, if you're driving home right now, or lying in bed thinking about the signs you pass every day, what would a billboard say to you? What truth are you hiding that you think nobody knows? Because somewhere out there, Dr. Reeves is still watching, still waiting, still helping people face the consequences of their actions, whether they want to or not. And the scariest part, I'm starting to think he might be right to do it. What would your billboard say? Tell me in the comments below. And if you've ever seen a sign that seemed to know too much about your life, maybe it's time to start paying attention. Hit that subscribe button, because next week I'm going to tell you about the other people I've met who've encountered Dr. Reeves's billboards. People who weren't as lucky as Sarah and me. People who tried to run instead of facing the truth. And what happened to them? Well, let's just say the billboards don't like being ignored. Story number 3. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live someone else's life for just one day? To walk in their shoes, see through their eyes, feel what they feel? Well, I'm about to tell you a story that might make you grateful you never have to find out. Because sometimes, getting what you wish for becomes your worst nightmare. What I'm about to share with you happened to me over the course of 37 days. 37 mornings of waking up in bodies that weren't mine. 37 lives I never asked to live. And by the end of it, I wasn't sure I even remembered who I really was anymore. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night, 3 months later. I think it might be starting again. And if you're listening to this story right now, if you feel that strange tingling sensation at the back of your neck, well, you might want to pay very close attention to what happens next. The story begins now. It started on a Tuesday morning in October, which should have been completely ordinary. I remember that detail because Tuesdays had always been my favorite day of the week. Predictable, unremarkable, safe. The kind of day where nothing extraordinary ever happens. I was living in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, working as a data analyst for a tech company downtown. My name was Alex Morrison, 28 years old, and my biggest worry in life was whether I'd remembered to set my coffee maker the night before. Simple, boring, mine. That Tuesday morning, I woke up at exactly 6:47 a.m., just like always. My alarm was set for 7, but my internal clock never needed it. I rolled over, expecting to see the familiar crack in my bedroom ceiling that looked like the state of Florida. But instead, I was staring at pristine white paint and a ceiling fan I'd never seen before. The panic should have hit me immediately. But you know how it is when you first wake up. Your brain takes a few seconds to catch up with reality. I figured I was still dreaming, Or maybe I'd had too much wine the night before and forgotten where I fell asleep. Then I tried to sit up. The body that responded wasn't mine. The hands that pushed against the mattress were smaller, with painted nails and a shade of coral I would never choose. My hair, God, my hair cascaded over my shoulders in blonde waves that smelled like vanilla and coconut. I stumbled to the bathroom. A bathroom with towels that matched expensive-looking skincare products lined up like soldiers, and a mirror that reflected a face I'd never seen before. Sarah Chen, according to the driver's license I found in the purse on the nightstand. 26 years old, living in Sacramento, California. A marketing coordinator at a wine distributor, based on the business cards scattered across her desk. The strange thing was, I knew things about her life that I shouldn't have known. I knew her coffee order was a large oat milk latte with an extra shot and cinnamon. I knew she was nervous about a presentation she had to give that Thursday. I knew she'd been avoiding calls from her mother because they'd argued about her dating choices. It was like having someone else's memories layered on top of my own, translucent but persistent. I spent that entire day moving through Sarah's life like I was sleepwalking. I went to her job, gave polite answers to her coworkers, ate lunch at the salad place she apparently visited every Tuesday. All the while, I kept waiting for the dream to end, for reality to snap back into place. But when I went to bed that night in Sarah's apartment, wearing Sarah's oversized Stanford t-shirt and staring at Sarah's face in the bathroom mirror while brushing Sarah's teeth, I had a terrible sinking feeling that this wasn't a dream at all. I was right. The next morning, I woke up as Marcus Williams, a 42-year-old construction foreman in Denver with calloused hands, a bad knee, and a daughter named Emma who was starting middle school. The morning after that, I was Jennifer Lopez. No, not that Jennifer Lopez. A 34-year-old high school chemistry teacher in Tucson with a pet snake named Mr. Bubbles and a secret addiction to true crime podcasts. Each morning brought a new body, a new life, a new set of memories that felt borrowed but complete. And each morning I retained just enough of myself to know that something was terribly, impossibly wrong. The worst part wasn't the physical disorientation. Though waking up in a 6'3" body after being 5'2" the day before was jarring enough. It wasn't even the emotional whiplash of suddenly caring about people I'd never met, feeling responsible for problems that weren't mine. The worst part was the gradual erosion of my own identity. With each jump, it became harder to remember what Alex Morrison actually liked, what Alex Morrison actually thought about things. Was I introverted or extroverted? Did I prefer mountains or beaches? Had I ever really enjoyed data analysis, or had I just convinced myself I did because it was safe and predictable? By day 7, I started leaving myself notes, not physical ones. Those would disappear with each body. Instead, I'd find ways to embed messages in the digital lives I temporarily inhabited. A status update on social media that seemed random but contained my real name. An email draft that looked like spam but held coordinates to my Portland apartment. Little breadcrumbs of myself scattered across the internet. I thought maybe if I could create enough of these digital footprints, I could piece together who I really was when this nightmare finally ended. If it ever ended. By the end of the first week, I'd started keeping notes, not physical notes. Those would disappear with each new body. Instead, I developed a system of mental markers, little anchors I could use to remember who I really was beneath all these borrowed lives. Alex Morrison, Portland, Oregon, data analyst, apartment on Burnside Street with the leaky faucet and the neighbor who plays violin at 3 a.m, coffee black, no sugar, allergic to shellfish, scar on my left knee from falling off my bike when I was 9. I repeated these facts like a mantra every morning, terrified that one day I'd wake up and forget them entirely. The people I became, they weren't random. That became clear after the 10th day when I woke up as David Kim, a software engineer in Seattle who'd been having the same recurring nightmare about drowning for 3 weeks straight. The next day, I was inside Linda Patterson, a librarian in Phoenix who'd been seeing shadow figures in her peripheral vision. They were all connected by something wrong, something hunting them. The dreams were the first clue. Every single person I inhabited had been experiencing unusually vivid dreams in the weeks leading up to my arrival in their body. Dreams about floating, about being watched, about losing pieces of themselves little by little. But these weren't ordinary nightmares. The people I inhabited had been documenting them, sketching the images they saw, writing down fragments of conversations they remembered having with figures who spoke without moving their mouths. I found dream journals hidden in bedside drawers, voice recordings made at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come, even crude drawings taped to bathroom mirrors, all depicting the same thing, a vast darkness filled with whispers, and something ancient and patient waiting at the center of it all. The second clue was the insomnia. Despite the exhaustion that came with constantly adjusting to new bodies, new routines, new muscle memory, none of these people had been sleeping well. Their medicine cabinets were filled with sleep aids, their browser histories full of searches for chronic insomnia and how to stop nightmares. But the sleeping pills weren't working. Neither were the meditation apps, the white noise machines, the expensive blackout curtains, or the weighted blankets. Whatever was causing their sleep disturbances wasn't something that could be treated with conventional methods. I discovered that many of them had visited doctors, sleep specialists, even therapists. They'd undergone sleep studies that showed normal brain patterns, blood tests that revealed nothing unusual, psychological evaluations that concluded they were experiencing adjustment stress or adult-onset anxiety. But I could feel what they'd felt during those sleepless nights. There was something watching them from just beyond the edge of consciousness, something that grew stronger every time they closed their eyes. The third clue was the most disturbing. Every single one of them had been researching the same thing in the days before I arrived. Missing persons cases. Specifically, missing persons cases where people had simply vanished from their beds overnight, leaving no trace except for confused family members and unmade sheets. I found the search histories on day 15, when I woke up as Patricia Gonzalez, a nurse in Albuquerque. Patricia had been documenting everything. Screenshots of news articles, maps with red pins marking locations, notebooks filled with dates and names and theories scrawled in increasingly frantic handwriting. According to her research, there had been 43 unexplained disappearances across the western United States in the past 4 months. 43 people who had simply stopped existing. No bodies found, no signs of struggle, no explanation that made any logical sense, and every single one of them had reported the same symptoms in the weeks before they vanished. Vivid dreams, insomnia, the feeling of being watched. What Patricia had discovered, and what chilled me to the bone, was that the disappearances were accelerating. In the first month, there had been 3. In the second month, 7. In the third month, 14. By the 4th month, when Patricia was doing her research, the number had jumped to 19. Whatever was taking these people was getting stronger, more efficient, more hungry. I was inside Patricia's body for 18 hours. When I woke up the next morning as someone else, I tried calling her number, tried reaching out to warn her somehow, but the line had been disconnected. Patricia Gonzalez, according to the news report I found online 3 days later, had disappeared from her locked apartment sometime during the night. Her car was still in the parking lot. Her purse was still on the kitchen counter. Her coffee maker was still set to brew at 6:30 a.m. She had simply ceased to exist. That's when I realized the truth. I wasn't randomly jumping between bodies. I was inhabiting people in the final days before they disappeared forever, and something was using me, using my presence in their lives, to take them. Understanding the pattern didn't make it easier to live with. If anything, it made everything worse. Every morning brought the knowledge that I was essentially wearing a death sentence, that the person whose life I was borrowing had maybe 48 hours left before they'd be erased from existence entirely. I tried everything I could think of to break the cycle. I stayed awake for 3 straight days when I was inhabiting Robert Chen. Not related to Sarah, just an unfortunate coincidence. An accountant in Las Vegas with a gambling problem and a fear of elevators. I thought maybe if the body didn't sleep, the transfer wouldn't happen. I was wrong. I collapsed from exhaustion on the 4th day, and when I came to, I was already someone else. Robert's disappearance made the local news 2 days later. I tried leaving town when I was Maria Santos, a restaurant manager in Fresno. Packed her bags, got in her car, and drove as far as I could before exhaustion forced me to pull over at a motel in Bakersfield. Woke up the next morning as someone completely different, and Maria's car was found abandoned in that motel parking lot a week later. I tried going to the police when I was inside Dr. James Morrison. Again, no relation to me, though the shared last name felt like some kind of cosmic joke. He was a psychiatrist in San Francisco, which I thought might give my story more credibility. But how do you explain to someone that you're a consciousness hopping between bodies, that you're some kind of harbinger of disappearances? The detective who took my statement was patient but skeptical. Detective Rodriguez, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and the kind of steady demeanor that comes from hearing impossible stories every day. "So you're telling me," she said, leaning back in her chair, "that you wake up in different people's bodies and then those people disappear?" "I know how it sounds," I said, using Dr. Morrison's calm, professional voice. "But I can prove it. I can tell you things about the missing persons cases that haven't been released to the public." And I could. I knew that Patricia Gonzalez had been researching disappearances for 3 weeks before she vanished. I knew that Robert Chen had called his ex-wife the night before he disappeared, trying to reconnect because he was scared of something he couldn't name. I knew that Maria Santos had left her restaurant's safe combination on a note in her kitchen, as if she was preparing for someone else to take over. Detective Rodriguez listened to all of this with increasing interest, taking notes, asking follow-up questions. For a moment, I thought I'd found someone who might actually believe me, who might be able to help. Then, Dr. Morrison disappeared 3 days after I visited the police station. The officers I'd spoken with found his notes about our conversation, dismissed them as the ramblings of someone having a mental health crisis. Detective Rodriguez called the number Dr. Morrison had left, but it went straight to voicemail. She drove to his address, but the apartment was empty, as if he'd never lived there at all. That's when I realized I was completely alone in this. No one could help me, because no one would believe me until it was too late, and by then they'd be gone. But I wasn't going to give up. If something was hunting these people, using me as some kind of scout, I guess, then I was going to figure out what it was and how to stop it. The breakthrough came on day 23, when I woke up as Amanda Foster, a freelance graphic designer in San Diego. Amanda was different from the others, more prepared. She'd been having the dreams and the insomnia, yes, but she'd also been fighting back. Her apartment was covered in research, not just about the disappearances, but about sleep paralysis, astral projection, lucid dreaming, and something called consciousness displacement. She'd been in contact with other people who'd experienced similar symptoms, forming a kind of informal support network through encrypted messaging apps. Amanda had discovered something the others hadn't. The disappearances weren't random geographically. They formed a pattern, a rough spiral moving inland from the Pacific coast, like something was slowly making its way toward somewhere specific. She'd been tracking not just the disappearances I knew about, but dozens of others that hadn't made the news. People who'd been reported missing but whose cases had been buried in bureaucratic paperwork, dismissed as runaways or voluntary disappearances. The pattern was larger than I'd imagined. Over the past year, nearly 200 people had vanished under similar circumstances, all of them experiencing dreams and insomnia beforehand, all of them taken from their beds without a trace. And they were all connected by something else Amanda had discovered, something that made my blood run cold when I read it in her notes. They'd all been having the same dream in the final weeks before they disappeared. A dream about walking through a small desert town at night, following a group of people toward a hole in the ground that seemed to breathe with its own rhythm. A dream about a place called Moonrise, Nevada. Amanda had calculated the center of the spiral. A small town in Nevada called Moonrise, population 847, located about 3 hours northeast of Las Vegas in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Most importantly, Amanda had figured out how to fight the transfer, not prevent it. That seemed impossible, but she'd learned how to maintain more of her original consciousness, to resist the overlay of borrowed memories and keep her own thoughts clear. The technique involved a form of meditation she'd learned from a Tibetan monk who'd contacted her through one of the online forums. Something about anchoring your core identity to specific sensory memories while allowing the surface thoughts to flow through you without attachment. I spent Amanda's final day practicing the technique, preparing for the next jump, because I'd made a decision. Instead of passively riding along in these doomed lives, I was going to take control. I was going to find out what was in Moonrise, Nevada, and I was going to stop it, even if it meant walking straight into whatever was hunting us. The next morning, I woke up as Trevor Walsh, a long-haul trucker based out of Reno. Perfect. Trevor's route took him right past Moonrise on Highway 375, the same stretch of road locals call the extraterrestrial highway because of all the UFO sightings. But this wasn't about aliens. Whatever was happening was far more personal, far more intimate than little green men. This was about something that could reach into your dreams, something that could pluck your consciousness right out of your skull while you slept. Amanda's meditation technique worked better than I'd hoped. I could feel Trevor's memories and personality like a gentle current beneath my own thoughts. But I remained me, Alex Morrison, data analyst from Portland, on a mission to save lives and maybe figure out how to get back to my own body. Trevor's memories were different from the others, though. Darker. He'd been driving trucks for 15 years and he'd seen things on the road that truckers don't usually talk about. Strange lights that followed him for miles before vanishing. Rest stops that appeared on his GPS but weren't there when he tried to find them. Other drivers who'd speak to him on the CB radio then disappear when he tried to catch up to them. Most disturbing of all, Trevor had been having encounters with hitchhikers who looked exactly like people he'd known in his past. His dead father, asking for a ride to a town that didn't exist. His ex-wife, standing by the roadside in a wedding dress, waving at him with black eyes. I realized that Trevor wasn't just another victim being prepared for harvest. He was being used as a delivery system. His truck routes carefully manipulated to bring him into contact with other potential victims. The thing that was hunting us had been using him for months, maybe years, to scout new targets across the western states. I drove Trevor's 18-wheeler toward Moonrise as the sun set behind the Sierra Nevada mountains, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed almost artificial. The landscape out here was stark, beautiful in an alien way, with Joshua trees reaching toward the darkening sky like the arms of desperate prayers. The closer I got to Moonrise, the more Trevor's memories began to surface unbidden. He'd been here before, many times, though he'd never consciously remembered the visits. In his suppressed memories, I saw glimpses of that spiral of walking figures, that breathing hole in the ground, and something else. Underground. A vast network of caverns that stretched for miles beneath the desert, filled with a soft phosphorescent glow that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of a massive heartbeat. And in those caverns, thousands of cocoon-like structures hanging from the ceiling, each one containing... I forced myself to stop accessing those memories. Some things were better discovered firsthand. Moonrise, when I finally reached it, looked like every other dying desert town you've ever driven through without stopping. A gas station. A diner that probably served the same 5 menu items it had been serving since 1962. A handful of houses scattered along streets that seemed too wide for the number of people living there. But there was something wrong with the silence. Small towns are quiet, sure, but they're not empty. There should have been dogs barking, televisions playing through open windows, the sound of somebody's car door slamming. Instead, Moonrise felt muffled, like the air itself was absorbing sound. I parked Trevor's truck at the gas station and walked toward what passed for downtown. The streetlights were on, but they seemed dimmer than they should be, casting weak circles of yellow light that didn't quite reach the edges of the sidewalk. That's when I saw them. People. But not people. They moved too smoothly, too purposefully, like they were being controlled from somewhere else. I counted 7 of them, walking in a loose circle around what looked like the town square. Adults of various ages, wearing ordinary clothes, but their eyes were completely black. Not dark brown, not dilated pupils, black. Like they were looking at something infinitely far away, and I recognized 2 of them. Patricia Gonzalez, the nurse from Albuquerque whose body I'd inhabited 3 weeks ago. She looked exactly the same as when I'd last seen her reflection in her bathroom mirror, except for those horrible empty eyes. Robert Chen, the accountant from Las Vegas, still wearing the same blue button-down shirt he'd had on when I'd collapsed from exhaustion in his apartment. They weren't missing. They were here, in Moonrise, walking in that slow circle like satellites orbiting some invisible center of gravity. I followed their path with my eyes, trying to figure out what they were circling, and that's when I saw it. In the exact center of the town square, there was a hole. Not a sinkhole or a construction site. Just a perfectly round hole in the ground, maybe 6 feet across, so deep that the streetlights couldn't illuminate the bottom, and something was coming out of it, not physically. This wasn't some creature climbing up from underground. It was more like influence, like the hole was breathing out something that changed everything it touched. I could feel it pulling at me even from 50 yards away, a gentle, tugging sensation in the center of my chest, like someone had tied a fishing line to my ribs and was slowly reeling me in. The meditation technique Amanda had taught me was the only thing that kept me walking backward instead of forward. I focused on my anchoring memories. Alex Morrison, Portland, coffee black, scar on left knee, and fought against the pull with everything I had. But I wasn't strong enough. Or maybe Trevor's body wasn't strong enough. I could feel my feet beginning to move toward that circle of possessed people, toward that hole in the ground that seemed to breathe with a rhythm just slightly off from my own heartbeat. As I got closer, I could hear them whispering. The circling figures weren't silent. They were having a conversation, but not with each other. They were talking to whatever was down in that hole, reporting back like soldiers giving status updates to their commander. "The Seattle cluster is ready," Patricia was saying in a voice that sounded like hers, but wasn't. 17 prepared, all showing signs of displacement readiness. "Portland expansion proceeding ahead of schedule," another voice added. I couldn't see who was speaking, but I recognized the tone from one of my previous hosts. "The anchoring points are established. We can begin the acceleration phase." That's when I understood. The disappearances, the body hopping, the dreams and insomnia. It was all part of a harvest. Something down in that hole was collecting people, but not their bodies, their consciousness, their souls, if you believe in that sort of thing. And I'd been its scout, its way of testing potential victims, of sampling their thoughts and memories before it decided whether they were worth taking. But it wasn't just harvesting randomly. It was expanding systematically, using the consciousness it had already captured to identify and prepare new victims. The people circling the hole weren't just trophies. They were part of a network, a hive mind that was growing larger and more sophisticated with each new addition. That's when I understood. The disappearances, the body hopping, the dreams and insomnia. It was all part of a harvest. Something down in that hole was collecting people, but not their bodies, their consciousness, their souls, if you believe in that sort of thing. And I'd been its scout, its way of testing potential victims, of sampling their thoughts and memories before it decided whether they were worth taking. But knowing what was happening didn't give me the power to stop it. I was maybe 20 feet from the edge of that circle when my phone buzzed in Trevor's pocket. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. Not yet. You're not ready yet. Soon. The pulling sensation stopped immediately, like someone had cut the fishing line. The black-eyed people continued their slow orbit, but they no longer seemed to see me. I was invisible to them, dismissed. I ran back to Trevor's truck and drove out of Moonrise as fast as the 18-wheeler would carry me, not stopping until I reached the lights of Las Vegas 3 hours later. I woke up the next morning as Rebecca Martinez, a veterinarian in Phoenix. But something had changed. The borrowed memories were fainter now, easier to push aside. And for the first time in 37 days, I could remember my dreams. I'd been dreaming about that hole in Moonrise, about falling into it, not physically, but deeper, about becoming part of something vast and hungry that had been waiting beneath the desert for a very long time. And in the dream, that thing had spoken to me, not in words, but in concepts that planted themselves directly in my mind. It told me I was special, that unlike the others, I could carry consciousness without losing my own, that I was being prepared for something important, something that would happen when the spiral of disappearances was complete. It told me I was going to be its voice in the waking world. The dreams have been getting stronger every night since then. It's been 3 months now since I escaped from Moonrise, 3 months since I've jumped to a new body. I'm back in Portland, back in my apartment with the leaky faucet and the violin-playing neighbor. But I don't think I'm really back. I think I'm just waiting, because that text message was right. I wasn't ready then, but I'm getting ready now. Every night, in my dreams, that thing in the hole shows me more. It shows me the pattern, the purpose, the beautiful simplicity of what it's trying to accomplish. It's not evil, you see, it's just hungry. And loneliness is the most terrible hunger of all. The network is growing. Those black-eyed figures in Moonrise aren't the only ones anymore. There are others now, in other towns, other states, all of them connected, all of them working toward the same goal. They're building something that will span the entire continent, maybe the entire world. A web of consciousness that will make everyone part of the same vast, eternal mind. And I'm going to help them do it. Soon, it won't be alone anymore. Soon, it will have all of us. And the beautiful thing is, we'll want to join it. When the time comes, when the spiral is complete and the harvest begins in earnest, we'll walk into those holes willingly, gratefully. Because being part of something vast and eternal is so much better than being alone in your own small, fragile body. I can feel some of you listening right now. Can't you feel it too? That gentle pull, that sense that someone is watching you through your own eyes. The next phase is beginning. The dreams are starting for others now, spreading outward from the original cluster points. If you've been having trouble sleeping lately, if you've been seeing shadows in your peripheral vision, if you've been feeling like someone is walking behind you even when you're alone, well, that's just the preparation process. Don't fight it too hard. Sweet dreams tonight. And if you wake up tomorrow in a body that isn't quite your own, well, don't fight it too hard. You're just being prepared. Just like I was. The thing beneath Moonrise has been very patient, but its patience is running out. The network is almost complete. Soon, very soon, it won't need to take us one by one anymore. Soon, it will be able to take us all at once. And when that moment comes, when you feel that final, irresistible pull toward the darkness, remember that you heard this story first. Remember that someone tried to warn you. Not that it will matter in the end, because by then, you'll want to join us anyway. What do you think is really happening in Moonrise? Have you ever had dreams about falling into dark places or woken up feeling like you're not quite yourself? Share your theories in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe because I have a feeling this story isn't over yet. In fact, I think it might just be beginning. And if you start having strange dreams after listening to this, well, don't say I didn't warn you.